Hi, everyone. It's time for story time. This week for story time, I was going to tell everybody the story of Cinderella. Everybody knows the story of Cinderella, right? So once upon a time, there was a girl, and her name was Ella. Now, I know what you're going to say. Just wait, you'll find out. You'll find out how she gets from Ella to Cinderella. Ready? So it was just Ella and her dad lived together with no mom. And as Ella was growing up, her father thought that she really should have some sisters. He was a businessman and he was away on trips an awful lot. And he was away a long, long time. So Cinderella, or Ella, was growing up and was becoming a beautiful young woman. And he thought it was a shame that she didn't have anyone around when he was gone. So he met a woman who had two daughters Ella's age and married her. And they all moved in together. And then the father went away on a very long business trip. Well, as soon as he was gone, the stepmother turned out to be very mean. And since Ella had the biggest room, she threw Ella out of that room and put the two stepsisters in there. And Ella had to live in a tiny little room in the back of the house. And then they made Ella do all of the work for them. They made Ella do all the cooking and all the cleaning. She had to sweep the floors and mop. And oh, it was just terrible for poor Ella. And so the reason she was called Cinderella is cinder is an old word for ashes. So if you burn something, there's ashes, right? Like you put something in a fireplace, you have wood and you're burning stuff. When it's all burned up, there's ashes in the bottom. Well, a long time ago, they called those cinders. And because Ella was cleaning things so often, and this is a long time ago, so the heating in each room was from fireplaces. So Ella had to clean the fireplaces all the time, so she always had ashes on her somewhere. So the wicked stepsisters were so mean, they wouldn't call her Ella, they'd call her Cinderella, like Ashy Ella. It was just not a nice thing to do. But they got the stepmother to do it too, so everyone just called her Cinderella. It was just mean. Well, one day, a messenger came to the house from the king, and he handed the stepmother a letter. And the letter went to every woman in the kingdom, so that the king had decided that it was time for the prince to get married. And he was going to have a huge ball. And ball is an old name for a dance. And invite all the women in the kingdom, and the prince would pick one of them and marry them, and they would become the princess. And eventually the queen and live happily ever after. So she read this, and the stepsisters were very excited. And Ella popped up and said, "So it says all the women in the kingdom, does that mean I get to go?" And the stepmother looked her up and down and said, "Well, I suppose, as long as you have all your work done and you have something reasonable to wear, not those cinder-covered rags." So Ella was very excited, but the stepsisters and the wicked stepmother gave her so much work to do that she didn't have any time to work on anything. She had one dress that wasn't too bad. It had a couple little tears in it, but she thought, well, I can cover those. I can put some ribbons, and I can make it look pretty good. But she had so much work. One thing, and the wicked stepmother was so mean. One thing she did was she brought Ella into the main room with the big fireplace, and she had a bowl of uncooked rice, and she threw it in the fireplace. And she says, "Pick all of that out, and don't miss one of them." Oh, it's going to be a lot of work. So Ella and the stepsisters and the stepmother didn't know this. Ella was so sweet and so nice, she could talk to little animals. She had friends that were mice and birds, and they loved Ella and would help her. So she made some bird noises and called some birds down and asked them if they would pick the rice out. So they did that. But the last day before the ball, Ella had so much work to do, she didn't have any time to work on her dress. So she went up to her room. She was so tired, and she went to look at her dress, and the mice and the birds had been working, and they had found ribbon and beautiful little flowers, and her dress looked really pretty. So she put it on. She was very excited. She washed, she cleaned, she did her hair. And she went downstairs, and as soon as the stepsisters saw her, they ran up to her and one said, "That's my ribbon, rip! That's my bell, rip!" And they just tore her dress all apart. And the mean stepmother laughed and said, "Well, I guess you can't go to the ball like that. Come on, my dears," and took the two sisters, and they left. Well, Ella was so sad. She had been so excited about going to this. And she ran out in the garden and cried and cried. And her fairy godmother heard her. And a little fairy popped out of an old tree and said, "What's the matter, my dear?" And Ella looked and said, "Well, who are you?" And the fairy said, "I'm your fairy godmother. I'm going to look after you. What's wrong? Why are you so sad?" And she said, "Well, I wanted to go to the ball. The prince has having a huge dance party, and I wanted to go, but I can't go. I have no way to get there, and I am got only rags to wear." And the stepmother said, "Well, that's no problem." And she had this little tiny wand with a little star on the end, and she waved it, and a pumpkin turned into a huge, beautiful carriage. It was so pretty. And she waved it again, and she turned some mice that were Ella's friends. She turned the mice into horses. And there was an old dog that lived in the garden, and she waved it, and he turned into a driver to drive the carriage. And Ella says, "Oh, that's amazing, but I can't go wearing these rags." So the fairy godmother waved her wand again, and Ella's hair flew up into the most beautiful hairstyle with a gemmed tiara and a beautiful blue dress and beautiful glass slippers. She'd never seen anything like it. And Ella said, "Oh, this is amazing. I don't believe it. Thank you so much." And the fairy godmother said, "There's just one thing. I'm very old, and my magic won't last very long, so it will only last until the last stroke of midnight." Because the clock would go bong, bong. It would do it 12 times. And at the 12th stroke, bong, the 12th bong, that was midnight. And she says, "You have to leave the party before that, because all of this will just change back to what it was before." "Oh, thank you, thank you." So she got in the carriage, and the carriage went to the ball. Well, everyone was already at the ball when Ella got there, so she made this big entrance. Everyone stopped and looked at her and said, "Who is that? She must be a princess from another kingdom. Look at those jewels. Look at that dress. Have you ever seen glass slippers before?" Everyone was so excited. Even the wicked stepmother and wicked stepsisters didn't know that that was Ella. So as soon as the prince saw her, he only wanted to dance with Ella. And they danced and they talked all night long. And Ella completely lost track of time. And as they danced and talked, suddenly Ella heard bong, bong. It was the clock chiming. She goes, "Oh no, oh, I've lost track of time. Oh, what time is it?" The prince said, "Oh, it's early yet. It's only midnight." "Midnight? Oh, I have to go. But wait." And Ella ran. And the prince chased her. "But wait, I don't even know your name," the prince said. And Ella ran up the stairs, and as she ran down the stairs to her carriage, one of the glass slippers fell off, but she had to go. Bong, bong. Hadn't been keeping track. She didn't know how many bongs had happened, and how close is it to midnight. She jumped in the carriage and said, "Drive!" The carriage flew as fast as it could out of the gate, and as soon as it was around the corner from the castle, the 12th stroke of midnight happened, and Ella could feel the carriage starting to shrink down. She jumped out the door just as the carriage turned back into a pumpkin, and the horses turned back into mice, and the driver turned back into a dog, and she was wearing all of her rags. But she looked down, and there was still one of the glass slippers. Well, at that same time, the prince reached down, and he picked up the other glass slipper, and he looked at it and says, "I will find you." So the next day, one of the king's footmen went around to every house in the kingdom, and he had a fancy pillow, and on the pillow he had the glass slipper, and he was taking it around to try it on every young woman's foot in the kingdom. Well, he got to the door, and the wicked stepmother showed him in and had him go sit down with the two wicked stepsisters. And knowing that Ella had been acting very strange, the stepmother locked her in her room. So the stepmother went back, but what she didn't know was that the mice were Ella's friends followed her and they snuck the key out of her pocket and they ran it back up to Ella's room. So while Ella was unlocking her door, he tried it on first one steps of the wicked stepsisters, and she couldn't even get her foot in. Her foot was so wide, it had like 2 toes sticking out like this. And she got up and she tried to walk like that, and the king's man, he looked down and said, "This doesn't fit. Get out of that shoe. Give me that. It's not you." And he tried it on the second stepsister. She could get the front of her foot in, but her foot was so long and so big, the whole back hung out. So she stood up and said, "I'm ready to go." And he looked down and it looked fine, but she was walking. And he looked and was like, "Your foot's not even in that shoe. Give me that shoe." And he looked at the stepmother and says, "You're obviously not the young woman we're looking for. Are there any other young women in this house?" And this wicked stepmother went, "No, there's no other women in this house." So the king's man was about to leave when Ella said, "Stop! I would like to try the shoe on." So she went down, and the shoe was a perfect fit. And in fact, as soon as she put her foot in, she says, "And here is the other one." So she put on the other foot, and as soon as the glass slippers were on, all of the magic came back, and she was wearing the beautiful dress and the beautiful gems and jewels. And says, "Ah, you are the beautiful woman. Come with me to the palace." And he turned to the wicked stepmother and said, "Guards, arrest that woman." "Arrest me? Why?" He says, "You have lied to an official of the king, which is the same as lying to the king himself. Take her away." So Ella went to the prince, and the prince asked her if she would marry him. And she says, "Yes, but I ask one favor." And he said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "Please, your men arrested my stepmother. Would you please don't arrest her?" He goes, "Well, why? She's been so awful to you." He goes, "I know, but I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody, even though she was mean to me." And the prince said, "You are too good, too good." He says, "All right, I will not arrest her, but I will make her work in the castle, her and the stepsisters, and they will have to serve you and clean for you and do all the things that they made you do." And so they did that. And except for the stepmother and the wicked stepsisters, everybody lived happily ever after. So that's the story of Cinderella. And next week, we'll have another story. Okay? Well, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.